Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Qi Xiaojun with Dominic.
Hello.
And Raymond.
Hello.
Welcome to Crossover again. And today let's talk about the film rating system. You're a movie guy, so you should know a lot about this. Well, the discussion about the rating system in China. We don't really have a rating system yet. And you're a father of 4 daughters. And you should be very much concerned about this rating system because since we really don't have a rating system in place in China, and it's really up to the parents to judge whether the movies are the right ones for the kids to watch.
That's an interesting concept. So there's any kid, a 5-year-old kid, could go watch
any movie.
Anything. Theoretically, anyone in China can watch any movies.
That's quite interesting.
Even movies like The Flowers of War, which
what's wrong with that?
Includes 2 rape scenes.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's about the rape of Nanking. So the violence is necessary to the story.
So
right?
we are talking about really a very open-up society here.
It is.
Especially when we're talking about the movies, the cinema industry.
Just generally in China, I mean, a child could go to a shop, buy a pack of cigarettes for his father and a bottle of 56% alcohol, and the guy behind the store, behind the counter, will not stop that kid from buying them.
Well, he will assume that the kid is buying it
for the parents. And generally they are, because I mean, I have to say, you go back to England, there's a lot of what you call feral youth. You know, young people hanging out in the streets, smoking, getting drunk, causing a lot of trouble. Something you really don't see happen very much in China. China's got a much stronger family unit, and the kids tend to behave and look up to the elders, and not. So you don't really have that kind of feral youth that you do in England that you do here.
So if you come back to the movie industry and talking about this rating system, and I guess we all have different understandings about the reasons why we should introduce a rating system. But as a professional, tell us, why do you think it is necessary for us to introduce a rating system?
Well, there are 2 schools in China. One is a pro-rating system camp, and the other is anti. The one that argues for the rating system says that of all the audiences, we have different age groups. And there are definitely a lot of movies that are perfectly okay for adults to watch, but not okay for youngsters, for the underage to watch. So we should basically design a rating system to protect the underage. But the other camp feels that if you do that, you're basically using it as an excuse to have more violence and especially more sex on the screen. And that's
actually their concern.
Yeah, that's their
concern.
Of
whether the introduction would influence the development of the movie
absolutely
industry.
I mean, movie stars are probably some of the most influential people on earth. Everybody looks up to Brad Pitt and Angelina and all of these people. And it's the same in China with the movie stars. If you see a favorite movie star in a really raunchy sex scene, you know, and you're only 15 years old, you're going to think, well, you know, maybe that's something I should be doing too because Andy Lau's doing it or whoever, you know what I mean? You're going to be influenced by that. So it's a very good point, really.
And also violent scenes.
Yeah, to a lesser extent, violence. Yeah, but actually we have more violence on the screen probably than any other country. But what the kind of violence we have on the Chinese screen is cartoonish violence.
Okay.
Such as in kung fu movies, martial arts. Yeah. You know, you see a lot of fighting and, you know, banging the head against the wall, but you don't see splashes of blood. You don't see people actually getting killed.
What about, say, the verbal violence?
Verbal violence, well, it's kind of
I mean, on
limited.
TV, you will see, you
hear
hear
swear
that.
words.
You hear that, but on
yeah.
movies.
In movies, usually, I mean, in the United States, they have actually more leeway with the movies than with TV. But over here, we can see, hear 4-letter words, like you know, the common cursing words on the screen. But it's not as ubiquitous as, say, a typical Hollywood production.
There's words that you just get used to them, really. I mean, Chinese swearing, I have to say, for people who are listening from overseas, it's some of the most unbelievable swearing I've ever heard in my life, and all my travels around the world.
It's very melodious.
Yeah,
right?
whatever that means. Your English is better than mine.
And also, it varies from place to place, because in each dialect, that word is different.
What are we discussing for this episode?
Let's back to swear
words.
words.
Are we talking about these swear words?
It's a good part of it.
Swear words is actually one of the signs that a certain movie should be, you know, rated high or low.
Now let's come back to this rating system. I mean, so far, I guess the most well-known rating system would be the American system. We have these G or PG, PG-13, and R and NC-17. Now, do not look at this.
Okay.
Dominic, Let me just give you some names of the movies, and you tell me whether they're suitable to be watched by kids. Mr. Bean's Holiday. That should be. We have G, PG, PG-13, R, and NC-17.
I would say that is a PG.
That should be under the guidance of parents.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly okay for anyone above 12 to watch.
It's actually
I think younger.
all ages admitted.
Yeah.
As general.
I
it
thought PG
doesn't
meant.
have any,
Oh, that's G. Okay, I thought PG was the
General
smallest.
audience.
No, the general is the lowest.
For everyone.
For
yeah.
everyone.
And
Parental
we
guidance.
have Transformers.
Transformers. I
Has
would
a lot of
say
violence.
a
But
lot of
cartoon
violence. I would
violence.
say that would be a 15.
15. We don't really have a 15. We have a PG-13.
PG-13.
Okay, it's
So
close.
it's yeah,
close.
it's about. And we have Shrek.
Shrek, I would say, is a parental guidance one.
Shrek is tricky because Shrek has a lot of adult content, but they cannot be understood by
kids,
by
anyway.
kids because it's like a line is delivered, and the parents, the adults, will get one meaning,
I really
and the
don't
youngsters
see
will get
anything
another.
wrong with Shrek. I mean, this is just animation.
You know, in America,
No, there's a lot of things in animation that are not suitable for kids.
You know, America's-
probably PG. I think PG probably.
it's probably this is an American system, but also America is a very conservative country in many ways, you know. And I tell you a really interesting fact that I saw the other day is, you know, there's this program called Big Brother, which is about people living in a house.
Yes,
the reality show
reality
in
TV.
the UK.
And it's a franchise that went all over the world.
Yes.
And there was 14 countries that they covered, and all of the countries of the 14, only 2 hadn't had sex in the house.
And that's the United States, right? Is one of them.
UK and the United States. And of the 14 countries with the highest teen pregnancy rates were UK and the United States, because we don't talk about it.
And in the UK, you have your own rating system, but actually in more details. And you have the universal parental guidance accompanied, but it says advisory 12, and 12, and 15, and 18, and restricted 18 above.
Oh, that's more complicated.
And how different can that be, 12 and 15?
Well, it's usually below the restricted that has the nuances. Because once above that, you know, it's one big group.
And in India, they have this universal parental required, adults only, and this restricted to special class of persons.
India's a funny one as well. I was in India recently, and I had to interview some people that were in the Bollywood sort of movie scene, and, you know, incredibly violent films. The Bollywood films, some of them especially.
More so than the martial arts films
I
from
would
Hong
say in many cases, yes. And yet they can't even have a woman really dressed in anything. You know, a woman has to be dressed up, really. It's getting more and more raunchy these days. But Bollywood films are incredibly violent, and everybody, kids of all ages, go to watch them. It's a cinema culture there.
It's like in India, sex scenes won't be allowed, but violence.
Yeah, I
is
think
allowed.
it's the same with China. It's
Very similar
probably
to China.
the Asian society that's more tolerant of violence, but not so of sex.
Yeah, sex scenes, they're more connected with the moral standards of the society, or the moral standards to be accepted by the society.
No, of course, I don't think violence is accepted here in China, but it's the depiction of this cartoonish violence that people take for granted and feel that, you know, it's because it's so out of this world.
It's not believable.
that
We
it's
believe
not
this is
believable.
not real.
Yeah,
so-
because, you know, nobody can just jump and, jump higher than the world record breaker,
That's
right?
Kung Fu.
Yeah, that's Kung Fu. So everything is stylized. Everything is exaggerated. To
It's
the
an art.
extent, yeah, to the extent that people basically view it in the same way that people view the musicals with
It's
singing
like
and dancing.
it's art. It's like
right?
bullfighting
Yes.
in Spain is not covered in the sporting section of a newspaper. It's covered in the arts and culture, because they consider killing a bull in an arena an art form, which is probably similar to kung fu in a way, isn't it?
And it is also an art to decide when to take a break in crossover. This is the
I'm
moment.
about to do a record-breaking jump.
You are watching Crossover with Redback. Welcome back to Crossover, and today we're talking about this rating system. We don't really have a rating system yet in China, but discussions have been going on for a while.
Yeah, for more than 10 years now.
Yeah.
Because a lot of filmmakers, industry insiders, they have been advocating a rating system. They feel that it's restricting them from their artistic expressions, because basically the lack of a rating system has the basis that everyone should be treated as a kid, right? But it's actually, the reality is somewhat different because we have the kinds of movies that are perfectly watchable by adults, but not suitable for kids.
Can we consider introducing the system that's been working in Hong Kong for many years, that 3-level system?
Don't bring up
to the
Hong
mainland.
Kong because it's the Hong Kong concept of the grade 3 films that's in Chinese called 三级片 that has left the most indelible impression on most people. Well, it's actually soft porn. It's not hard porn. It's soft porn, softcore porn. And that kind of movies is the raison d'etre, the rationale that some people feel you need a rating system in the first place. And that's why there are so many people in the establishment who are fighting against it.
Are you for or against the rating system?
I'm for. I'm totally for. I feel that with the rating system, we actually have less violence and less sex. Because in the United States, all filmmakers, all movie directors, they want a grade that's suitable for kids. Basically, one step lower, than not one step higher. Because if your movie is rated NC-17, then a lot of movie theaters will not show it because they feel it's too troublesome to check the ID of every patron.
What about the attitude of these, say, producers, movie producers, directors, actors, actresses, and what is the attitude of them? I mean, are they for or against it?
Well, it has little to do with film actors. It has a lot to do with the directors.
Okay.
Because the directors, they have this concept and they want to tell this story. And if the story has sex and violence embedded, like, you know, the rape of Nanking, right?
Sex and violence altogether embedded.
It's like, it's part of the
That's
story.
a winner right there.
Yeah, you cannot get away with it. If you want like an urban romance, you know, if you can do it in a raunchy way, or you can do it in what the Chinese word called 小清新, it's really, you know, very puritanical way. It really depends on style.
But what's wrong with more sex in the movies?
Because
Good
the
question.
rationale is, those who are against the rating system will feel that the more sex you portray on the screen, the more sex people will have in real life.
Is that not a fantastic thing?
Once again,
billion.
we're talking about this moral standard that can be accepted by this country. China, remember, when we talk about sex, is very conservative.
Yes.
I mean,
It is conservative,
it's a private issue. We do not talk about it.
It's funny, sex in China, I know we've gone off,
Just do it.
we've gone off a bit, off no be rude, but it's an interesting one because sex in China is quite a funny issue. One road that I traveled up recently from South Fifth Ring to Fourth Ring, I must have counted 40 or 50 sex shops that were selling sex toys. Almost every 300 meters. And it's everywhere now. And it just amazes me that a society that can be so conservative towards sex sometimes, on the other hand, can be so open to it.
That
Also,
can be accepted, but at the same time, we do not talk about, especially do not talk about it in public.
Dominic just mentioned the sex shops, right? I think that was a huge breakthrough in you know, concept. Because I think before those shops were allowed, a lot of people will feel it's a big deal. It was so big a deal that allowing it will be, you know, chaos, will lead to chaos. So I think if someday a rating system is introduced, there will be the same kind of anticlimax as we have seen with the sex shop.
Climax
It's like,
being the right word.
That's step one.
Yes.
That's step one. Now, talking about this rating systems, and though the government hasn't decided when and whether to introduce this rating system, but it's been tried out actually by one of the cinema lines. It's called Bona, and this is the Bona Film Group. What?
Yeah, it's a listed company.
It's a listed company.
Perfectly respectable.
And they're not saying they're
Despite the
trying
name.
to do the ratings. They're only saying these are the advices given by the cinema line to the parents. Because, you know, it seems, you know, there is an information gap for all these parents to decide whether the movie should be suitable to be introduced to their kids to watch. And then this is the moment when we see the role of this, you know, the cinema line. They're trying to filling that gap, to try to provide some information, more information.
You know what, in China, it's going back to the family unit, the reason why I think you can get away with not having ratings in China, it's one of the few countries I've been where the family unit, where discipline within the family is so important. You really listen to your parents. And if your parents say, don't go and watch that film, you won't go and watch that film. Whereas in England, if there was no ratings and you could go see any film you want, you'd be like, no, of course, Mum, I won't go see that film. But you'd go out the door, you'd go watch it. You'd go watch all the hardcore films you could possibly watch because you don't listen to your parents. I never listened to my parents. I do exactly the opposite of what they told me. It's not really how it works in China, is it? Most children tend to listen to their parents. So you could get away with the system in China without ratings. I think you really could.
Oh, yeah, there's another way. There's this very well-known teenage romance film from Taiwan. And it features very raunchy scenes. But of course, in the movie theaters, they showed a cleaned-up version. But the complete version is available online.
Of course. It's all online though, these days, isn't it?
But this is about teenagers having a romance, having a love affair in high school. And it's quite pure and like a typical film that you'd expect on screen. But it has some scenes that are shocking, even for me.
Now, let's talk about this rating system. It seems somehow we got this impression it's because the government, they do not want to introduce this system because if we introduce this system, it somehow gives people that impression that the government would try to encourage more than just to allow that the movie directors and producers to produce these, say, porn-like movies in the future. At the same moment, what about these producers? Because somehow I've also heard about this argument saying they do not want to be actually classified as a adult movie or a violent movie because that's going to affect their box office. They're worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite reasonable to think that way because if your movie is classified as the so-called grade 3, then a lot of teenagers may not be able to see it legally, at least. And that's bad for your box office. And so I feel that you give the choice to the filmmakers. They will make the decision whether they need that kind of element in the story. If the story is like Lust and Caution, then you take a chance. Basically, you are excluding all the young audiences, right?
But can you have directors saying what's morally acceptable for children to watch? I think that has to be classified by the government, not by a director, surely.
Yeah, that's the reality now. That's the reality now.
There'd be a reality in any country, really.
Well,
if you were to let the industry...
In the United States, it's not classified by the government. It's by an industry group made up of representatives from parents. They do not have the right to ban any movie. They just give it like a stick. Say what kind of content this movie has, right? And then they leave the decision to the parents to make whether they want to take their children along.
Now, it seems it's not that a difficult task to decide whether a rating system should be introduced or not. And generally speaking, it seems a lot of people would support this idea. But as to how to do it in details and how can that be done in reality, in the real world, we are going to talk about some challenges after a short break. You're watching Crossover. This is for general audiences. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossover. All these, say, movie professionals are for, well, most of them
are
for the idea of introducing this rating system, but at the same time, how do we do it? I mean, one argument is, say, China is such a huge country. We have 56 different ethnic groups. And one scene that cannot be accepted by one ethnic group, might be 100% okay to a different group. And how do you decide?
I think we may not need a rating system per se, but we should put some of the controversial content, specify that content, so that parents will know the movie contains this kind of thing, and they can make the decision. Say, for The Flowers of War, made by Zhang Yimou, it's a perfectly good movie, but it contains very graphic scenes of rape. And the parents will say, oh, my kid is too young. She's only 12. She should not see it.
You're saying on all these posters saying we have 4 scenes of rapings.
Well,
we
actually,
have 15 scenes of, physical violence.
The U.S. system used to be very simple, right? Just G and PG. And then there's a lot of complaint from the general public. They said, you tell us it's PG-13, but why it's PG-13? We don't know. And then from that time on, they started adding the details.
G means general audiences. No nudity, no sex, and no drugs. Violence must be cartoonish and minimal. And there may be language that goes beyond polite conversation. PG means parental guidance. There may be strong language, like shit or ass. And brief nudity, like showing off an ass. Or light violence, like getting kicked in the ass. PG-13. Parents are strongly cautioned, as in, look out, Mom, here come more shits. Bullshit, dumb shit, little shit, shit-faced, and shithead. Fuck is also allowed, but usually just once, so filmmakers are urged to choose their fuck carefully. A simple fuck you is okay, but referring to the sexual act as in, may I please fuck you, or I enjoy getting fucked, is totally unacceptable. If a character says that, especially while abusing an illegal narcotic, the film is rated R. R means restricted. No children 17 or under without parent or guardian. There may be sexual themes, frank sex talk, sexualized nudity, tough language, and tough violence, like 1,000 handicapped orphans decimated by a hail of gunfire. But if the film depicts realistic baby-making in a position other than missionary, acts involving oral sex with females, anal sex, fetishes, more than 2 humans, or what the MPAA deems aberrational behavior, that film could get slapped with an NC-17. NC-17 means no children 17 or under, period. An NC-17 may range from a senior citizen gangbang to a foreign Pedro Almodovar film. But art films make people feel funny, especially the ones with aberrational behavior.
This is going to be the highest rated crossover show in history.
Now, I'm just thinking, you know, if that promo is on, that demonstration is on, I'm wondering whether this episode can be counted as for general audiences or for PG-13 or 15. I'm not quite sure. What about this? PG-13 50 years ago and PG-13 this year.
I think you've struck a very interesting, very good point. Because I remember 30 years ago when the first Chinese movie, the first mainland movie, used
with
a kiss
scene,
kiss scene in a romance film. That was a big deal.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you've come a long way.
And actually, the female lead, instead of saying "I love you," because she cannot bring herself to say "I love you," so she instead of saying "I love you," I love my motherland.
Oh, nationalism! I love it. That's very, very
so
moving.
it's been evolving. So you know.
Yeah, it has, especially in the past 3 decades. There's so much change. The kind of thing like public display of affection, right? Seeing young people kissing on the street. In the old days, 30 years ago, the Mabel Granny would have reported that to the local police, and the police would come and pick them up. It would be considered hooliganism. People 30 years from now will feel that you 3 guys are so strange talking about this. They don't see any problem.
What a big deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, but who gets the chance to decide the ratings of different movies?
I think it should be the public and also some experts, a panel of experts who really know child psychology.
That's not going to happen in China, though, is it? I think the government will always control that.
No, it's already happening, actually. Remember with the State Administration of Radio, Film and Television, they have their panels of specialists in movie industry, and they are not only having people from the government organizations, they're also having these representatives from, say, the industry institutes and, and also, say, the academies, the universities. I guess they are represented to some extent.
But the rules are not stated. Basically, you have to guess. You have to guess from the movies that passed the census and distinguish them from those that failed to pass, and to see where the line is.
And talking about this rating system, and they're not only talking about that system in the movie industry, and there are also talks about the introduction of the rating system in the online gaming industry, and even in the publishing world.
Gaming, that's something that has to be controlled. I mean, you look at the most recent horrific tragedy that happened in Norway with that guy killing about 70 young people. He said that he did all his training on video games. Some, shoot 'em up video games. And you go into an internet cafe in Beijing, everybody's playing.
So sex and violence in video games, online games.
I think video games are much more relevant
And they're much
to
more
this
powerful.
age group than movies or television. I mean, very few people are watching television now, especially the young people.
But how do you do it? I mean, with these online games?
Oh, I mean,
I mean, all these identities are virtual identities anyway.
but it's very real to them. They pay real money.
But I mean, how do you control
upgrade
the
themselves.
age? How do you control the age of these players?
I don't know, but I feel that really the regulators should pay attention to those areas where the youngsters, the underage people really are. It's not like, you know.
I mean, with the cafes,
In the
that's fine.
1950s.
These, internet cafes.
But I mean, the point is, a 6-year-old boy in Beijing can go and buy an incredibly violent game, or download it online for free and play it at home, where he's killing people, in Iraq, killing people in different war scenes, and it's incredibly violent, and no one's monitoring that at all right now.
No, I think a lot of parents, a lot of adults have the misconception that
Games
are for kids. Yeah. Animation is for kids. They have never seen animation that's totally, hardcore pornography. But it's done with animation. So they have not changed their concept. They have not evolved, but their kids have changed so much in the past
What's
decade.
interesting is I recently read an article about how internet is killing the porn industry, how pornography used to be $1 billion industry online.
It's
but then,
all available now online.
But now it's all on these free sites.
shared, right?
And it's shared. And people think there's nothing immoral about downloading free porn. Whereas like with music, like a British band Radiohead, they put their music online and say, you can pay what you want for it. This is our music. We'll put it online, and it's an honor system. You can give us £1 for it, you give us £100 for it. And people were giving them money. They made millions of pounds because they appreciate them as a creative brand and band. But with pornography, people think it's kind of immoral anyway. And so they're quite happy to download it for free and not pay a penny for it.
What about the publishing world and for the books? Do you think it is necessary to introduce the similar system?
Well, I feel that with that, it's probably unnecessary because in the early days of opening up, there are people who basically used fine arts, pictorials, and medical books as substitutes for soft porn.
I remember those
right?
ones.
Nowadays, you go to a bookstore, you don't see any kids going to that section.
Because
It's
it's
all-
online.
They
It's
can
all on
find
the
everything.
internet.
Yeah, they
And
can
it's much
find
better.
the real thing on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think those books are being misused.
Yeah, so in a time now where basically, if my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter, if she wanted to, she's got internet in her bedroom, she could access all of that pornography. What I see as a parent, my job, is to tell her it is there, and you can access it if you want, but to make her a mature enough child that she can make that decision.
Are you
know what I
worried
mean?
as a parent?
Of course I'm worried as a parent, especially with the interaction online, with social networks and her meeting the wrong people.